In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the I-cord bind off in the round. So I've prepared this small in the round swatch to demonstrate on. Now to begin this bind off, there's a couple of ways to do it. I'm just going to show you one way in this video, and then the instructions around this video will have links to another method that I encourage you to check out. But for this method, we're going to start with a provisional cast on. You can use any provisional cast on you like. I prefer the crochet cast on for this particular technique. But again, you can do any one you like. There will be a link to the crochet cast on in the notes around this video so that you can learn how to do that if you want to. And to begin the I-cord bind off, we are going to cast on the same number of stitches as we want our I-cord to be. So I've just casted on 4 stitches because I'm going to do a 4-stitch I-cord, and I'm using waste yarn. So you'll see the yarn that I just casted on with is a very different color, a contrasting color from my work, and I encourage you to use a contrasting color for a provisional cast on just so it's easy to identify. And again, I'm doing a 4-stitch I-cord. You can do, typically I-cords are 2, 3, or 4 stitches. They can be more, but that's not the norm. And then you're going to, so I've casted those onto my left needle. My working yarn is on my right needle, as you can see here. So make sure you see how it's set up. So you can see here, my working yarn is coming off my right needle. My newly casted on stitches are on my left needle. I'm going to demonstrate this first with Continental style knitting, and then I will show it to you in English style knitting because this is a very repetitive procedure. So to begin, well, with the crochet cast on, I need to back up just for a second. That I just did the first half of the cast on. To finish the cast on, I have to knit those stitches that I just casted on with the waste yarn. It is a 2-part cast on. So now that I've knit those 4 stitches, the cast on is finished. I'm going to transfer those 4 stitches back to the left needle, and now we're going to start our I-cord bind off. So we're going to knit 1 less stitch than what we casted on. So since I casted on 4, I'm going to knit 3 stitches and then slip, slip, knit. Slip, slip, knit. Now I've got 4 stitches on my right needle, and I'm going to pass those 4 stitches back to the left needle, and we're going to do that again. We're going to knit 1 fewer stitch than what we casted on. So I casted on 4, so I'm going to knit 3. And then slip, slip, knit. So slip, slip, knit. Now the slip, slip, knit can be done a little bit differently. If that looks weird to you the way I'm doing it, don't worry. You probably just do it with the other method, which I will show in this next pass. I'm putting the 4 stitches back on my left needle. I'm going to knit 3 since I casted on 4. You always knit 1 less than you cast it on. And then slip, slip, knit. And you might do your slip, slip, knit by inserting the needle in this direction. Either way is fine. Pass them back. And I'm going to switch now to the English style to show you what it looks like if you hold your yarn in your right hand. It's the exact same stitches, they just look a little different because it's a different way of holding the yarn. So we're going to knit 3, or knit 1 less than what you casted on. So like I said, you can cast on usually 2, 3, or 4 stitches. The more stitches you cast on, the bigger your I-cord bind off will be. So I'm knitting 3, and then slip, slip, knit. Pass them back to the left needle. to knit 3. One less than what I casted on. I figure if I repeat it enough, maybe you'll remember it better. And then slip, slip, knit. And this time I'm going to do the slip, slip, knit, inserting my needle in the other direction. You can insert it in this direction, or you can insert it in this direction. It really doesn't matter. Either way is going to make the slip, slip, knit exactly the same. There we go. And then slip those back to the left needle. And I want to show you a little bit about the I-cord right now. So I'm going to drop the yarn, and you'll see as you're knitting the I-cord, the yarn is coming out of this 4th stitch down. It's coming out of the bottom stitch of your I-cord rather than the stitch up here at the needle tip, which is a little bit weird and takes a little bit of getting used to. Just, you know, keep practicing with it and you'll do fine. But what that does is each time then you bring that yarn up to knit this first stitch here, it tightens it up around the back here, and that's what forces your stitches into this tube that it's making for the I-cord. You can see the beginning of my I-cord here. This is my little in the round swatch, and the stitches are going vertical, and then the I-cord, the stitches are going horizontal and forming a tube. You'll continue around your work the way I just showed you until you get to the very end. And I have a swatch here that I've already prepared to show you how to graft the ends together. So I have finished knitting my last row of I-cord. And my stitches are still on the right needle. I'm not transferring them back to the left needle when I finish the very last row. Okay, so they're on the right needle. With my left needle, I'm going to find my provisional cast on. And with the crochet cast on, I always crochet extra chain stitches so I know which end to start at. So where the extra, you can see there's extra crochet stitches at this end, but there is not at this end. So I'm going to pick out my little crochet chain here. And while I'm doing this, I should also mention some people, instead of doing slip, slip, knit, do knit 2 together through the back loop, or they do a slip, knit, pass a slip stitch over. And what that decrease does is it joins the last stitch of the I-cord with the next stitch of your main piece, and that's what causes the bind off, is because you're basically working those 2 stitches together. So now I'm going to pick up my stitches. So you have the tail coming through, if you use the crochet cast on anyhow, you have the tail coming through this one stitch here. I always pick that one up. We'll probably end up dropping it off at the end or before we begin the grafting, but I pick it up because I'm honestly never quite sure if I should or shouldn't, and that will make sense here once I get them picked up, and you'll see what I mean. And then pull the tail out. And I've lost my little loop. It's going to be quite fiddly picking this up. I think I got it. And again, I do have a separate video on the crochet provisional cast on that you can watch to learn specifically how to do this step of it. And once I pick it up, I should have 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have 5 on there. So yeah, I should not have picked up that first one. It's always a little bit tricky, especially with the small diameter of these I-cords. It's not quite as tricky when you're working on a regular in the round project, but I'm just going to drop that first one off and move them back. And that last stitch looks funny because it's an I-cord, and I-cords are just a little bit funky in that it looks, it is kind of connected, you know, from the pulling that strand up from the 4th stitch up to knit the 1st stitch. Okay, so now we're going to Kitchener stitch. So you have your working yarn coming out of the stitches on your back needle, or the needle that's furthest away from you. You can see that it's coming off of this back needle here. And it is at the needle tip, not down at the other end. And we're going to Kitchener stitch. So to Kitchener stitch, people get wigged out about it, but it's not too bad once you learn how to do it. There are 2 setup steps. We're going to insert the needle into the 1st stitch on the front needle purlwise and pull the yarn through, and leave that stitch on the needle. Then on the back needle, the other setup step is to insert the needle knitwise and leave that stitch on the needle. Now, the rest of this is very repetitive. On the front needle, we are going to insert your darning needle knitwise and slip that stitch off of the needle. Then insert the needle purlwise into the next stitch. And on the back needle, we do the opposite. We insert the needle purlwise and slip the 1st stitch off the needle. Then in the next stitch, we insert the needle knitwise and leave it on the needle. So I have a little mantra I say. So it's knit off, purl for the front needle, and then purl off, knit for the back needle. Then knit off, purl for the front needle, and purl off, knit for the back needle. Then you get to a point where you just have 1 stitch on each needle. So we're just going to knit off the front needle, my yarn is not cooperating, and purl off the back needle. And if you did it too loosely or too tightly, it's okay. You've got a long tail. You can kind of use your darning needle to fix up the stitches. I've got 1 stitch there that looks a little wonky on the inside there, but once I sew my tail in, it would pull that down onto the inside, but I think that looks pretty good. It's a seamless way to finish off your I-cord. And as I mentioned, I do have another video for the applied I-cord that shows a different method that does not use a provisional cast on, that is a little bit less fiddly than this one, and I encourage you to check that out. But I am doing this video specifically for the scale gras pattern knit along we have in the Knit Along Club. And in that pattern, they specifically say to use a provisional cast on and do it this way. So I thought I would demonstrate how to do that.